government housing unit. But despite that, he rose to be very successful in academic, sports, business, and civic organizations. So he went on to PMA and eventually to Annapolis, where he excelled in mathematics and operations analysis. He was consistently in the superintendent's honor list and became the company commander, which is a high position in the Brigade of Midshipmen. Now, to guide you during the question and answer portion, I need to say this. He was a brigade boxing champion for 4 straight years. So, later in the question and answer portion, be sure to manage yourself well. That was certainly a record, and apparently he's the first to achieve this feat since the academy was established in 1845. Wow. After Annapolis, he went on to take his MBA in the best college of business in the Philippines, which is the one in UP. Sabi ni Vic. Uy, konti naman respeto. And he graduated valedictorian in his class. He has had a long and colorful, distinguished career as a public servant. 3 years that being Postmaster General of the Philippines, 3 years as member of the Philippine Cabinet, serving as the National Security Advisor, and going on 15 years as a Congressman of the Philippines. And each of those wins have been landslide victories, earning him the title of Landslide King of the Philippines. What's even more impressive for me is that he actually has a 100% attendance record in the House of Congress. I don't know how many people has this, sir, but certainly only one. So there's only one. It speaks of, I guess, a person's commitment to the job, isn't it? Whereas I think many others couldn't care less if they were absent for a day, a couple of days, a couple of months. He has many more accomplishments and accolades. He's actually quite a great guy, if you ask me. Without further ado, let me introduce this Congressman or 2nd District of Parañaque, Congressman Roilo Golez.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan, for the very kind introduction. I was asking Governor Rafi Garcia whether you're connected with the military because of your haircut. Hindi niya alam. ROTC. Baka Boy Scouts. Thank you. Thank you again, Alan, for the kind introduction. And to the MC, Vic Aquino, my classmate from a long time ago. Medyo matagal-tagal na. I would like to give a special greeting to the President, Roilo Golez, and congratulate him and you for all your achievements in the Rotary Club of Pasig. I was going over your reports here. So the next presidents are going to have a very challenging time because in the tradition of the Rotary, the next president should always achieve something bigger than the one who's succeeding. That is the good tradition in the Rotary Club. As far as I know, because I'm also a member of the Rotary Club family in Manila. I also would like to greet, I already mentioned, this is Governor Rafi Garcia, the President-elect, Hermi Orbe, of course, a good friend from way back, your president nominee, Daki Paredes. Daki. Vic Lim, who was the one who invited me, we ran into each other during a 40th anniversary celebration of a mutual friend. Vic and I had known each other for quite a long time because he also worked in the same bank that my wife worked for about 20 years, RCBC, the Uchenko Group. Marami pang makakilala dito, mga matagal ng kaibigan, Benny de Guzman, for example, Manny Reyes, parehong Rotary and Red Cross. Pasensya na yung mga ibang hindi natin nabanggit. si Rading Dumlao, a very dangerous person, with a very dangerous product, truth verifier. I hope the Inner Wheel Club will not become interested in your product, Rading. That is a product that must be destroyed immediately, according to some people here. The first time that I spoke in this club was a long time ago, when I was still the Postmaster General. And I remember your meeting was held in the then one of the most elegant restaurants in Metro Manila, Madrid restaurant. I remember, I think the president of the club at that time was Cesar Bautista, also a family friend, the late Cesar Bautista, who eventually, Mandaluyong ba yan? Who eventually became district governor of your district. By the way, as I said, I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Manila, the mother club of all the Rotarians in the Philippines. I was asked to talk about the Scarborough Shoal, better known, legally known as the Bajo de Masinloc. That is the legal terminology for Bajo de Masinloc. Traditionally also, the Panatag Shoal. And I'd like to start by showing you a picture of how the Bajo de Masinloc would look like if you go there riding a boat or a ship. This may look like several specks of rocks. And some people would say, malit lang ito, hindi masyado importante ito. But let me read to you the physical description of the shoal. The shoal forms a triangle-shaped chain of reefs and islands, but most of the rocks, 55 kilometers around, with an area of 150 square kilometers. 150 square kilometers is about 3 times the size of the area of my city, Parañaque City. It is about 5 times the size of Pasig City. Pasig has an area of about 31 square kilometers. Parañaque has 45. And a little smaller than the area of Quezon City. Quezon City is about 160 square kilometers. So now you can visualize how many boats, how many ships can be put inside. Because it has a lagoon with an area of 130 square kilometers. Isipin nyo na lang, yung Commonwealth Avenue, which is only a small part of Quezon City, maghanay ka ng mga ilang vapor doon. Ilang vapor kaya ang pwedeng makapila from EDSA all the way to Fairview. So you can imagine how many ships can be put there of varying sizes inside the lagoon. Especially considering that it has a depth of 49 feet. A frigate, a destroyer can get inside. Especially pag dinredge siya, no? Of course, if a military power will use that as a base, one of the first things that they would do is to dredge the place to make sure that it can accommodate even the biggest warships possible. The shoal is a protrusion from a 3,500 meter deep abyssal plain. Several of the islands, including South Rock, are 1/2 meter to 3 meters high, and many of the reefs are just below water at high tide. Near the mouth of the lagoon are the ruins of an iron tower, 8.3 mile high. It is about 123 nautical miles west of Subic. And the nearest landmass is Palawig, Zambales, on Luzon Island in the Philippines, with a distance of about 137 nautical miles. Yung circumference niyan, the perimeter, if you are riding, for example, a 20-knot boat, it will take you about 2 hours to go around the shore. So medyo malaki. This is a bird's eye view of how it looks like. Nakikita nyo, merong natural entrance doon sa lagoon. And as I said, a military power with the expected engineering capability can easily convert that into a military base, a naval base. In fact, during the Second World War, there was a similar atoll called Ulithi. Ito yung ginamit ni Admiral Halsey as a base. It has an area of about 3 times the area of this Pero doon, ipasok niya mga battleships, mga destroyers, aircraft carriers, and they used that as an R&R place during the Second World War by Admiral Bull Halsey and his fleet. Now, in 1690, somebody drew a map of this area, including the Philippines, Malacca Strait, Borneo, part of Indonesia. A certain Vincenzo Coronelli, an Italian from Venice. At may kita nyo rito, yung sinasabi ng China, na sabi nila, ito raw kanila na a long time ago, but you can see that there is no trace whatever of Chinese ownership here. Not even Chinese terms, dahil kung talagang kanila ito, nung palang kinilala na yan. Pero ang tawag dito, Mare del Indis. We were known as the Indis during that time. Kaya ang tawag sa atin noong una ng mga Kastila, mga Indio. So, and you can see the demarcation lines already to designate what would be known as the territory of the various features there. Like, for example, Borneo, Vietnam, the Sumatra, Java area, and the Philippines. So makita niyo yung demarcation line in the Philippines that includes Luzon, Visayas Islands, Mindanao, Palawan, and kasama dyan yung Scarborough Shoal or Panatag Shoal or what we now call the Bajo de Masinloc. Another map was made in 1734 by a certain Jesuit, Father Pedro Murillo Velarde. At dito, makikita nyo na nakita na yung feature ng Scarborough Shoal. Yan yung triangular shape about a little below the middle part of this slide here. Yung Sambales, if you're familiar with the geography of Luzon, yung Sambales, yan yung Manila Bay, no? Yung bay dyan, that's Manila Bay, and then Bataan, and then if you go north, that's already Sambales, and it goes all the way to Lingayen Gulf, the Pangasinan area. So a close-up will show the panakot pa ang tawag dyan. At nung panahon na yan, kinikilala na yan ay parte ng Pilipinas. So these are the historical evidences of our claim to the Scarborough Shoal or what we now call the Bajo de Masinloc. This is another view of the map. Now ito naman ang tinatawag na South China Sea or now we call the West Philippine Sea. This is now the center of so much attention. And it has been so for so many years already. May kita nyo yung mga tuldok-tuldok, yan yung Spratlys. And then Scarborough Shoal is a little off Manila Bay. It's not part of the Spratlys, so we should not mistake Scarborough Shoal as part of Spratlys. Yung blue line, the blue lines are the exclusive economic zone lines of the various coastal states in the area. Makita natin yung ating blue line, no? West of the Philippines, and you will see that a lot of the Spratlys are inside our exclusive economic zone. And Scarborough Shoal is way within our exclusive economic zone. Kasi ang exclusive economic zone is 200 nautical miles from the coastline of the coastal state. Andyan ang Vietnam, yung Brunei, yung Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. etc. Yung red line, yan yung tinatawag na 9 dash lines. In 1947, China unilaterally declared that all the waters inside the 9 dash lines are their territory. No basis, no historical basis, no legal basis. It was just a unilateral declaration in 1947. When that was during the time of the Kuomintang, panahon pa ni Chiang Kai-shek. When Mao Zedong took over, they also took over the claim. They assumed the claim as part of as theirs. And this has been the site of so many skirmishes and battles, like for example, the Paracels in the early 70s. A lot of Vietnamese died there when this was invaded by China right after the US-Vietnam War. In the Spratlys, dumada sa may off the Johnson Reef in 1988, there was also an encounter there between the Chinese Navy and the Vietnamese Navy. 3 Vietnamese ships sank there, and about 70 Vietnamese were killed in that encounter. So you can see that that is an evidence that China is willing to shed blood in pursuit of their claim. Ngayon, I had the good fortune of being designated as the chairman of the technical working group back in 2007 and earlier by the chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs when we crafted the Archipelagic Baselines Bill in 2007. And we passed House Bill number 3216. And during that time, the objective there was to define our baselines, to define our territory in accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We studied several options. Option number 1 would consider the traditional baselines of the Philippines plus consider Scarborough Shoal as a baseline. Yan yung protrusion dumada sa off Luzon. And consider our islands in this Spratlys as regime of islands. That's option number 1. Option number 2 would follow our traditional baselines and consider Scarborough or Bajo de Masinloc plus the Spratly Islands as regime of islands. And therefore, pag ganun, yung the body of water between the islands and the mainland of the Philippines would not be considered territorial sea. They would be considered high seas. And each island would have its own territorial sea. Option number 3 would consider the Spratlys as baselines and Scarborough as a regime of islands. And finally, option number 4, which was the most extreme of all, which would claim the biggest part of territorial sea, would consider Scarborough and the Spratlys as part of our baselines. And therefore, the body of water between those physical features would be part of our territorial sea. And that was the option that we adopted in our House bill. But when we came out with that bill, there was a lot of pressure coming from the Department of Foreign Affairs to change that. According to them, it would result in a lot of complications, and very obviously, there was pressure, although this was not admitted, there was a lot of pressure from China to discard this version and go back to option number 2. And because of that, after a series of meetings with a high-powered group from the Department of Foreign Affairs, we agreed in the Committee on Foreign Affairs and finally in the House to adopt option number 2, to consider Scarborough Shoal or Bajo de Masinloc and the Spratlys as regime of islands and follow the traditional baselines of the country. And that, andito yung definition ng regime of islands under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Islands would have its own territorial sea, it will have a contiguous zone, an exclusive economic zone, etc., etc. And this resulted in Republic Act 9522, now called the Act to define the baselines of the territorial sea of the Philippines. We identified 101 baselines, and they're all over the archipelago of the country. And Section 2 of Republic Act 9522 very clearly stated that the following are going to be considered as regime of islands and therefore part of Philippine territory. Number 1, the islands that we claim in the Calayan Island Group, better known as the Spratlys, under Presidential Decree number 1596, and B, Bajo de Masinloc, also known as Scarborough Shoal. And that is the putting into a legal form our claim on the 2 features, the Calayan Island Group and the Scarborough Shoal. When we came out with this was on March 10, 2009, there was some expression of displeasure from the Chinese embassy. And this was published in the papers during that time. Manila, March 14, 2009, stating that the envoy conveys to DFA China's displeasure with the RP baseline law. It was just an expression of displeasure and not a formal protest that eventually died down And the article stated as follows: Beijing is not pleased with the inclusion of the Calayan Island Group and Scarborough Shoal in a baseline law signed by President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo this week, according to China's embassy in the Philippines. But that was it. It was not a formal protest. They did not go to the United Nations. They simply expressed their displeasure. Nagreklamo lang sila. And it was quiet for a while. Until April 11, 2012, ito, alam niyo na ito, no? A series of incidents happened, and the first incident was a press conference conducted by the Secretary of Foreign Affairs and the Flag Officer in Command of the Philippine Navy, where they announced that the Philippine Navy was able to apprehend some Chinese fishing vessels, and they tried to apprehend some Chinese fishermen because of the illegal harvesting of endangered species in the Panatag Shoal or in the Bajo de Masinloc. And this started, ito na, nakalagay pa yung picture dito, various marine species found in 2 Chinese fishing vessels, fishing boats. And ang nangyari dito, it started this standoff that we are now very familiar with. So you can see, it started April 11. Today is April 7, June 7, so it's almost a 2-month standoff. And mamaya, pag babagitin ko pa sa inyo ano pang ibang mga events that were triggered by this standoff. Some Chinese vessels intervened. This prevented the Philippine Navy from doing its duty. Prudence and diplomatic interventions came into the picture. And this started the standoff. Unti-unti, padami ng padami, yung mga vessels coming from China. These were vessels from their Bureau of Fisheries and Maritime Surveillance Department, not from the PLA Navy, but from the civilian agencies of China. And because of that, pinull out rin natin yung ating Philippine Navy ship, the Gregorio del Pilar, our bagong luma, ang tawag namin sa Navy dyan, bagong luma na vapor. Bagong dating, pero matagal nang medyo luma na. Alam nito, Pasig ibig sabihin, because he's an expert in shipbuilding. Pero okay pa rin niya, kahit na bagong luma, okay pa rin. So naging ang standoff was between civilians, white ship to white ship. Kaya lang malalaki yung mga vapor ng China, and some people are saying that they may be civilian ships, but they actually may be armed ships in case it becomes necessary. So this triggered a series of incidents. China rejected the Philippine request for mediation in the Sea Row. We said, there is a dispute. If you're questioning our claim, let us go to the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, or ITLOS. Sabi kasi ng China, they can document their claim, but they are refusing to go to ITLOS. They're refusing to have this mediated by an international body, and to me, this is a sign of weakness. Kasi kahit na tayo, di ba, sa experience natin, pag meron pinag-aawayang lupa at ikaw may hawak na dokumento, ang unang sasabihin mo, magkita tayo sa korte. Pero pag medyo mahina, mag-usap na lang tayo sa tabi-tabi at mag-negotiate tayo, baka pwede pag-usapan ito. Yung mas may dokumento is the one who will be more than willing to go to court. And that is the case on the part of the Philippines. Pero nireject ng China ito. Lumaki na lumaki, and there's so many who have come into the picture as a gesture of patriotism. And one of those that made a lot of noise is a group of Filipino-Americans in the United States, led by a very prominent Filipino-American, Chinese Filipino-American businesswoman. Ito si, kilalang-kilala siya, milyonaryo, si Lewis, no? Nicholas Lewis, who is known as a very successful businesswoman there, who inherited a business by her husband and even made it bigger. Ang ginawa ng grupo nila, nag-start sila ng mga demonstrations, and they have called not only on Filipinos in the United States and in Canada, but all Filipino communities all over the world to demonstrate in front of Chinese consulates and embassies, and use to a maximum, for maximum effect, our international network, which is our advantage here. Our advantage is that we have about 8.5, maybe 9 million Filipinos situated all over the world. Sabi nga nila, the sun never sets on the Philippine communities because of the presence of our OFWs. So yan ang ginagawa nila, no? And of course, this is something that China is not very comfortable with, because they don't want to make this an international issue. To them, it is better that this be handled on a one-on-one bilateral issue, minus the publicity that will be triggered if it is internationalized. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin stand-up, nagkaroon ng mga participation ng mga hackers. Some hackers hacked Philippine websites, and there was counter-hacking by Filipino hackers also, targeting China websites. This has continued for quite a while. Tapos meron mga balikatan exercises, long schedule, but some people try to identify it as part of a reaction to this stand-up. Actually, it was not. We have been conducting balikatan exercises since as far as I can remember. In fact, one of the things that I would like to mention to you, insofar as ownership of the Philippines is concerned, is that as far back as the late 60s, as far back as the early 70s, and I'm a personal witness to this, we were conducting naval exercises in the Scarborough Shoal area. And the Chinese were not complaining during that time. Philippine Navy ships and US Navy ships were using the Scarborough Shoal for target practice, live fire. And the Chinese were not complaining during that time. So that to me is losing by default. If indeed they really owned Scarborough Shoal during that time, they should have complained in the same way that we are complaining about their presence here, notwithstanding the fact that they are 100 times more powerful than we are, because we feel that we have the right to do that because we can document our claim. Pinag-usapan din ng China in the US-Philippine security talks. And all of a sudden, this has become the focus of international attention. And on May 1, there was this 2+2 meeting between our Secretary of Foreign Affairs and Secretary of National Defense with their counterparts. This was held in Washington, D.C. In the U.S., the U.S. was represented by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta. And in that meeting, the first thing that Secretary Clinton mentioned after the meeting in their press conference was that they are reaffirming the obligations of the United States with respect to the Mutual Defense Treaty. Reaffirming. But of course, they also made a statement, and this disturbed some sectors because this was subject to a lot of varied interpretation, that they are going to be neutral with respect to the dispute. So some people are saying, if they're going to be neutral, how can they reaffirm their obligation under the Mutual Defense Treaty? But here, I'm going to discuss this because the obligation under the Mutual Defense Treaty are different from their position with respect to the dispute. The dispute is with respect to territorial dispute, subject to an international arbitration. And that is where the United States, in my interpretation, is saying that they're going to be neutral. But they have reaffirmed the Mutual Defense Treaty, and I'm going to discuss that later. They also said that they're going to deliver another vessel similar to the Gregorio del Pilar. But ako naman, as a Navy officer, sabi ko sana yung tunay na Navy ship ang ipadala nila, hindi yung converted na 50-year-old Coast Guard cutter na sabi di-deliver na walang armas. Because there are so many available frigates in the stockpile of the United States like this one. This is an FFG-7 guided missile fast brigade, the Oliver Hazard Perry class. Ito tunay na Navy talaga ito. Merong missile ito, may missile capability, and probably if we are talking of a respectable defense capability, having maybe 2 or 4 of this would give us that respectable defense capability. Dumami ng dumami yung mga Chinese vessels. Meantime that all of these are happening, naging 14 and for a while it even went up to almost 100.